Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to day 2 of our Advent week of Rejoice this year. For joy to the world, the Lord has come. So, I have a question for you today. In the most difficult times of your life, have you seen God's faithfulness? His promise to always be with you. Well, in today's part of the Christmas story, we are going to see that even during the one of the most difficult times for the Jewish people, God was still faithful, just as he is today, to his promise to deliver his people. And we'll be looking at the verses from Matthew 2, verses 13 to 23 today. And as we do so, I want you to think about that question. In the most difficult times of your life, have you seen God's faithfulness? But before we get into today's lesson, let me say thank you to each and every one of you that have been on this journey with me this Advent season to truly immerse yourself in the Christmas story, to have a really good idea of what all was happening. I mean, it's wonderful to celebrate the birth of Jesus at this time of the year. But I believe it's also important for us to fully immerse ourselves in the backstory of how it came to be so that every year we can have a fresh set of eyes whenever we observe the nativity scene. So let's get into the story. But before I read these verses to you, I need to give you just a little bit of what was happening in the first 12 verses of this chapter. The first 12 verses here center around the wise men who saw the star that they had been looking for. They had been reading the prophecies over and over again. They knew that they would see a sign in the sky, and they knew that the time was approaching when that star should appear, and it did to them. Now, we don't really know exactly what part of the Orient or in that area that they came from, but we do know that they traveled a long, long ways to bring gifts of frankincense, gold, and myrrh to present before the king. Now, on their journey, they stop in at King Herod's palace because, him being a king, they just really assumed that he would know where to find this Christ child. And so they explained to King Herod that they were following the star. Could they help him out just a little bit? The thing you need to know about King Herod is that he himself considered himself to be all powerful. So anytime he saw a threat to his power, his position of king, he immediately removed it. He even went so far, folks, to kill his wife because he thought she was trying to take his throne away from him, and several of his sons. I mean, that's true paranoia. So imagine when 3 wise men appear at your doorstep and tell you that they are seeking another king. Well, here we go again. Paranoia sits in. But he conveys to these magi that when you find him, please come back and let me know because I would like to worship this king as well. Magi's are great, awesome. So they go on their merry way until the star stops over the manger scene of where Mary and Joseph and the baby are born. Now, once they have celebrated and visited with the family, the angel of the Lord appears to them and lets them know you cannot go back to King Herod. He has awful plans for Jesus. So the Magi, being very respectful and all knowing of the God of Israel, they decided to go back home through a different route. And that's where our story picks up today. When they had gone, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream. Get up, he said, take the child and his mother and escape to Egypt. Stay there until I tell you, for Herod is going to search for the king, for the child, to kill him." So he got up, took the child and the mother Mary during the night and left for Egypt, where he stayed until the death of Herod. And so was fulfilled what the Lord said through the prophet, "Out of Egypt I will call my son." Now, if you recall, when the Israelites left Egypt, way back in Exodus, God pulled his people out of an awful situation. So here, Egypt is being used as a refuge, a protection place for Jesus until it is time for him to go back home. So once again, he is following the path of his people, where he will be pulled out of Egypt. When Herod realized that he had been outwitted by the Magi, he was furious, and he gave orders to kill all the boys in Bethlehem and in the vicinity, of every little boy who was 2 years and old or under, in the accordance of the time he had learned from the Magi. That was what was said through the prophet Jeremiah would be fulfilled. "A voice is heard in Ramah, weeping and great mourning. Rachel is weeping for her children and refusing to be comforted, because there are no more." After Herod died, an angel of the Lord appeared in a dream to Joseph in Egypt and said, "Get up, take the child and his mother, and go to the land of Israel, for those who were trying to take the child's life are dead." So he got up, took the child and his mother, and went to the land of Israel. But when he heard that Archelaus was reigning in Judea in place of his father Herod, which, I need to let you know, was just as evil as his dad, he was afraid to go there. Having been warned in a dream, he withdrew to the district of Galilee, and he went and lived in a town called Nazareth. So was fulfilled what was said through the prophets, that he would be called a Nazarene. Isn't it wonderful to know that throughout this beautiful story, even in the moments of conflict, of threat of life, God had a plan to protect his son. He sent his angels to instruct Joseph and Mary, not once, but twice, to gather up the little family and move it to a place of safety, because Jesus' time had not yet come. And so here we see that even in difficult times, God is there. He has a plan. And so long as we follow that plan, then we are, I like to think of, in a little bubble of protection, because God has the plan. We know that whatever God's plan is going to work, and we just have to follow it, just like Mary and Joseph did here. Matthew notes that the flight from Egypt, to Egypt, fulfilled the prophecy of Hosea, which, as I mentioned to you before, that out of Egypt I will call my son, just as God had called Moses to bring his people out of Egypt. So Matthew took the story of Moses pulling the Israelites out of Egypt, and he interpreted it here as the same as what God was doing to show. I mean, we already know the lineage of Jesus, but these are now physical acts for these people to see and be able to relate to, that this story that Jesus represents his people. He is following the same stories, the same implications of God protecting his people. Well, here, Jesus is being protected by God by removing him to a place of safety and then pulling him out of that. Again, moving him to a place of safety. And here in the coming days, we will see where this son of Nazarene will once again fulfill another story from the Old Testament. When we hear about the weeping of the mothers, and in the verses that we saw that Rachel herself is weeping, this connects itself to a very, very tragic event that we find in Jeremiah. Rachel herself was weeping for her children because they themselves had also been um, executed. Rachel in the Old Testament is seen as the matriarch of Israel. So when we hear about Israel weeping, it is referring to a mother figure, and that mother figure is Rachel from the Old Testament. I am sorry, but mercy. Whew. You know how those eyelashes can just jump right down in there. Excuse me. The significance of this particular passage, in which Matthew shares with us the protection in great times of turmoil, uh, sorrow. Like I said, God had a plan. He was protecting his son from harm so that he could continue the mission for which God had for him. Matthew also emphasizes that these events of Jesus being moved from uh, Bethlehem into Egypt, and then later we'll see out of Egypt, fulfills the Old Testament prophecies that will demonstrate that Jesus is the true Messiah. I want to read this one little passage here that I put down for you because I think it illustrates exactly what it is I'm trying to tell you. The parallels between Jesus's early life, and we're talking, let's say 4 years of age and earlier and younger, and the story of Israel, both spending time in Egypt and then being pulled out of Egypt, highlights Jesus as the true Israel and the one who fulfills the promises to God's people. Although these innocent children were massacred, they did serve a purpose, as horrible as it may seem, and that is that evil and sin exist in the world, even though there were signs that the Messiah had finally come. This sets up for us the ministry that we will see from now until Easter of Jesus' life. I hope that you will continue to follow me throughout the rest of this Advent season. But remember, I want you to think about that one question that I asked you in the beginning. During difficult times of your life, how have you seen God's faithfulness to you? Look at these difficult times in Joseph's life here, even for just a little bit. The threat that King Herod's going to come and kill his child. God provided a plan. He told him to take him out. And even when he was ready to bring him out of Egypt, there was still the threat that Herod's son, Archelaus, may seek the same retribution. But once again, God had a plan, and he instructed Joseph to take him to Nazarene instead. You know, it's just wonderful, and I hope it is for you too, that during difficult times in our lives, we may not be able to see it at the time, but God is working. He's working whenever we're suffering and battling through the grief of losing a loved one. He is working from the moment that we get that dreadful news of some horrible disease that has inflicted us or one of our loved ones. He's working. And although we may not see it at the time, I do know that upon reflection, you're going to see where those times that you just could not imagine taking another step, another breath, that God was there. It might have been in a thought, it might have been in the unexpected phone call of someone calling you to give you encouragement, or someone just stopping by to chit chat with you or to call you out for lunch. There are so many ways in which God is always there, walking us through, still today, even in this sinful world that we must live in. So I have another question for you. What are you doing to help those around you during this holiday season to see God working in their lives? Because we do know that at this time of the year, for many, it may be the first Christmas without a loved one. It may be the first Christmas in which they're going through something devastating health-wise. And we also know that many suffer from this time of the year of the winter blues. So it's very hard for them to find the joy of Christmas. Are you going to allow yourself to be an instrument that God can use to help these people to remember that this is a joyous time of celebration, to rejoice in the knowledge that knowing God is still at work in their lives, that God still loves them, and that He is just one prayer away. Thank you, as always, so much for being here. Please be sure to come back tomorrow as we continue rejoicing in this third week of the Advent. So until then, please always remember to be the light, especially at this time of the year, out there in the darkness for someone today, because you never know, could be your light that they're waiting to see. I love you guys. Bye.